Welcome back. Well, you can't blame visitors to our beautiful country who want to see as much of it as they can. But travelling on our roads is dangerous at the best of times. And when you couple that with a driver who has little knowledge of our road rules or basic English, the consequences can be deadly.
I would describe some of their driving as kamikaze.
No tests.
Could be a fraudulent licence.
No English.
I really think you've got to be able to speak the language.
No idea.
The consequences are horrific.
Russian roulette on Australian roads.
You have pleaded guilty to 2 charges of culpable driving.
With homegrown drivers in the firing line.
We both come off. Unfortunately, Missy died at the scene.
Tonight, should overseas drivers sit tests before they get behind the wheel here?
Someone has to check on them, that they can drive properly.
And should tourists display warning signs on their vehicles to let us know they're on our roads?
One of the biggest hazards that we have on the road that is being overlooked are these overseas drivers.
It's something every parent fears most, their child dying before them. Janet and Daryl's son Stephen was killed in a horrific car crash near Hervey Bay 3 years ago. A woman from Hong Kong travelling in the opposite direction committed the ultimate driving sin when she crossed double lines to overtake a truck and hit Stephen head on.
I just feel for people that if they had to go through what we went through. It's not nice.
On the idyllic Kangaroo Island, the ugly wreckage of a motorbike strewn across the road. Lewis was overtaking when a Frenchman in the car in front pulled out, forcing his motorbike off the road. Lewis was seriously injured. His passenger, wife Missy, died at the scene.
I turned my head around and saw my wife and knew that what they were going to say next.
Simon loved to kite surf, but now he needs a cane just to walk after a Chinese tourist who'd only been in Australia for 2 days hit him head on while trying to overtake another car near Perth.
I just remember thinking, oh, my neck's broken. It went click, and that was the end of it.
Even this Queensland cop wasn't immune, his helmet cam capturing a wayward Dutch driver coming straight at him. The bloke had only moved here 3 weeks earlier.
What are you on the wrong side of the road?
The needless accidents and senseless deaths that might have been avoided if overseas drivers had been better prepared to tackle our roads. So what are the rules when it comes to allowing overseas visitors to drive here? Well, motorists from 43 countries can use their international licence without having to sit a theory or practical test. But what's most surprising is that many of the countries on the list of 43 drive on the right-hand side of the road, not the left like we do here.
They turn up at the airport, hop in the car and they drive away, and they're not familiar with our road rules. Okay, Bonnie, we're going to...
Port Douglas driving instructor Stephen Lee is alarmed at the number of crashes and near misses on the tourist-laden roads in his neck of the woods. Lee is calling for safety driving videos to be played on inbound flights and is pushing the radical idea of tourists to display T-plates on their vehicles to warn us that they are on the road ahead.
The idea with the T-plate was pretty much like we do with the P-plate is to give some kind of recognition to other drivers that the person behind the wheel is not familiar with our road conditions.
But the foreigner who killed Daryl and Janet's son was no tourist. Rachel Wong was here on a working holiday visa and was allowed to exchange her Hong Kong licence for a Queensland one as soon as she landed. Under our laws, Wong should have held a Hong Kong licence for at least 12 months before exchanging it. But she'd only had her Hong Kong licence for 2 months, yet was still able to get an open Queensland licence. 9 weeks later, she killed Stephen and his work colleague in the head-on collision. Wong was sentenced to 4 years in jail, but was released after 15 months and deported.
Possibly if she was one of ours, she may have had time to take evasive action, but she's probably not used to our situation and our roads.
Offering more of an insight into the capability of foreign drivers are those people from outside the 43 countries. They're required to sit a theory and practical test before getting behind the wheel here.
Now, many of these drivers have obtained open licences in countries like China, India, Sri Lanka, and basically they just can't drive safely on our roads, and inevitably when they go for their practical test they will fail.
Overseas drivers should get a local licence within 3 months of becoming an Australian permanent resident. However, if they remain a visitor, they can continue to use their overseas licence as long as it's valid, like one inept Chinese woman driving instructor Stephen Lee gave a lesson to.
She went out and bought a car, and she's had 3 crashes in Port Douglas, luckily non-serious accidents, but she's still driving around on her Chinese open licence.
Somewhat more astonishing, overseas drivers don't even need to understand English to pass our driving theory test. Australia makes the test available in a range of languages, and if it's not, the applicant can bring an interpreter to the motor registry.
And we also can't guarantee that that person doing the test with the interpreter is not getting assistance.
During her career behind the motor registry licensing desk, Robin saw her fair share of international drivers applying for a New South Wales licence. She's shocked by the lack of comprehension shown by non-English speakers getting their Australian licence.
I would describe some of their driving as kamikaze, and that is brought over into Australia when they come over, because that's the only way they know how to drive.
So what can be done to educate foreign drivers and help keep us safe? Those deeply impacted by accidents involving foreigners are calling for overseas drivers to undergo mandatory driving tests before being allowed on our roads.
How do we educate people that driving in Australia is not like driving in your own country?
Men and women on the front lines observing the ability of international drivers up close say action needs to be taken.
The irony is that we put a lot of effort into making sure our younger drivers are safe. We make them do 100 hours of supervised logbook driving. They've got to be on their Ps for 3 years before they can get an open licence, and yet there's absolutely no restriction at all on overseas drivers.
Just seems like yesterday.
Sure does.
For Daryl and Janet and many, many others, it's a case of how many more deaths caused by foreign drivers will it take to realise we're facing a danger head on.
People that might be listening to me, they say, oh, you know, you silly old thing. Well, that's okay. It's not your son or your daughter or your mother or your father or someone. So I think something should be done.